how does the story of creation compare with the theory of evolution? Evolution says that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. The creation story says he created it in 6 days. How do we explain this? Now, we don't simply want to cast off science, but how do we hold to the truth that is being conveyed in a mythological form in Genesis 1? That's the question. Science tells us that 98% of human DNA is shared with chimpanzees. There's a general consensus in the science world that human beings evolved from early primates. The anatomically modern human being, the Homo sapien, finds continuity with the early caveman. And here we have the evolution of the skulls of the hominids. And when we compare them with primates, then we also see this evolution in size and in weight. There is continuity, though we want to say that the Homo sapien, the human being, is something distinct and different. Does the Church allow its members to believe in the scientific theory of evolution, in which there is a general consensus? In 1950, Pope Pius XII issued a document entitled Humani Generis. Generis is the Latin term for kind or class or race. So here we're looking at the human race. And here he does expound or examine the question of the theory of evolution. So the English title is concerning some false opinions threatening to undermine the foundations of Catholic doctrine. Now, there is a position which the Pope condemns with regard to human evolution. But on the grander scale, at the end of the day, the Church will say that it is possible to believe the human race evolved from early primates. However, Humani Generis teaches two main teachings with regard to evolution. If you choose to believe in evolution, you must maintain the theory of monogenism, and secondly, that the soul of man does not evolve. So recall again the distinction between faith and reason. And here we have the Church saying clearly that science is not the area of expertise, which is the concern of the Church. However, when science teaches something that is related to or touches upon the Church's teaching on human beings and human life and human activity, then indeed the Church does have something to say. It will not make a pronouncement of a scientific nature, but it will make a pronouncement in terms of the faith in relationship to that scientific idea. So here we're looking at evolution, and let's take a look at the text itself. The main ideas are found in paragraph 36 and 37. So we read in 36, "For these reasons, the teaching authority of the Church does not forbid that in conformity with the present state of human sciences and sacred theology, research and discussions on the part of men experienced in both fields take place with regard to the doctrine of evolution." Again, the Church does not forbid discussion on the doctrine of evolution, in as far as it inquires into the origin of the human body as coming from pre-existent and living matter. Okay? So again, the Church is saying that this is not forbidden to consider the doctrine of evolution understood as the body evolving from pre-existent and living matter, the early primates, the apes. Okay? In continuation, "For the Catholic faith obliges us to hold that souls are immediately created by God." That's the key phrase. Note there is a distinction here. Evolution pertains to the human body. If you choose to hold to evolution, the Church does not say you have to, but it allows you to, if you so wish, follow what science proposes to us. If you hold to the theory of evolution, that theory only applies to the human body, the material aspect of man, as evolving from pre-existent and living matter. On the other hand, besides the human body, the human being also has a human soul. And this soul does not evolve. Rather, it is immediately created by God. So Catholics can faithfully maintain their Catholic faith, even while holding to a doctrine of evolution regarding the body, but maintaining that the soul does not evolve. The theory of evolution does not apply to the human soul. The document continues. "However, this must be done in such a way that the reasons for both opinions, that is, those favorable and those unfavorable to evolution, be weighed and judged with the necessary seriousness, moderation, and measure, and provided that all are prepared to subject that judgment to the judgment of the Church." So the Church allows its members to believe in evolution, follow science, But in so doing, it's reminding us or teaching us that we must maintain that evolution, the theory of science, does not apply to the soul. And secondly, that these discussions on both sides, it's not being biased and taking only one side, but both opinions, favorable and unfavorable, must be weighed and judged with necessary seriousness. Okay, we take these issues seriously with moderation and measure, and at the end of the day, the Catholic faithful should submit their judgment to the judgment of the Church, to whom Christ has given the mission of interpreting authentically the sacred scriptures and defending the dogmas of faith. Okay. Some, however, rashly transgress the liberty of discussion when they act as if the origin of the human body from pre-existing and living matter were already completely certain and proved by the facts which have been discovered up to now, and by reasoning on those facts, and as if there were nothing in the sources of divine revelation which demands the greatest moderation and caution in this question. So here, Pope Pius XII is warning that we should not fall into the rash transgression in liberty with regard to this discussion, assuming that the origin of the human body in the theory of evolution is already completely certain, that it's a proven fact, and that it does not need to be put in dialogue or subject to the judgment of the Church. Rather, we need to respect that the Church has been granted the authority, this mission to interpret the sacred scriptures and to defend the dogmas of our faith, and that these sources of divine revelation demand the greatest moderation and caution with regard to the question of the origins of human life. 37. When, however, there is a question of another conjectural opinion, namely polygenism, the children of the Church by no means enjoy such liberty. So here, Pius XII is condemning clearly a scientific position of polygenism. Polygenism is that scientific theory about human origins, positing that the human race comes from many different origins. This is in opposition to what the Church wants to teach, which, as we said earlier, is a monogenism, that there is only one single origin of humanity. Now, why would the Church teach this? Why would Pope Pius say that the children of the Church do not enjoy the liberty of the conjectural opinion holding to polygenism? So the explanation is here. The Church is not making a scientific claim here, but rather insofar as a scientific claim impinges upon the faith, the Church is making a statement. For the faithful cannot embrace that opinion, which maintains that either after Adam there existed on this earth true men who did not take their origin through natural generation from him as from the first parent of all, or that Adam represents a number of first parents. Church teaching will maintain that there was one original primal pair. The entire human race descended from this pair, and we call them Adam and Eve. Now, why is it so important to the Church to maintain that Adam and Eve are the original ancestors of the entire human race? And it's not that there was an Adam and Eve in Mesopotamia, and then there was Barbara and Steve in Northern Europe, and then another couple out far east in Asia. Why not have many points of the beginnings of the human race? The Church does not allow us to believe this if we are members of the Church. Why? Now, it is in no way apparent how such an opinion can be reconciled with that which the sources of revealed truth and the documents of the teaching authority of the Church propose with regard to original sin. This is the tenet of faith which the Church is concerned with defending. Now, original sin pertains to the entire human race. It's the condition of the entire human race being born into a predicament of disorderedness of our wills and of the world around us. Original sin proceeds from a sin actually committed by an individual Adam, and which through generation is passed on to all and is in everyone as his own. If we said there are many origins to the human race, then there cannot be a doctrine of original sin. Original sin infects the descendants of Adam and Eve. But if there is also a Barbara and Steve elsewhere, then you suddenly now have two races of humanity, one which is infected with original sin and the other without. And that's not what the Church understands to be the case and the condition of original sin. Therefore, to maintain the doctrine of original sin, the church says we must hold on to the teaching of monogenism, which is that the origins of the human race begin in one place, in one original couple. Polygenism itself is only a scientific conjecture, and so the church is defending a tenet of our faith, which is very essential. Without contradicting science, this is a hypothesis, but also allowing the Catholic faithful to uphold the scientific theory of evolution if they so choose, given these conditions. Now, why is it so important to maintain the doctrine of original sin, you might ask? Well, why did Jesus come to save us? He came to save us from the condition of sin, which began with our first ancestors, Adam and Eve, in the fall, with original sin. Now, if there's a whole group of other human beings who do not have original sin, then now you have a group of human beings who are not in need of salvation. And that simply does not reflect objective reality, nor is that the case. The redemption that Jesus offers to us is universal. It is for all human beings, from all times and in all places. So returning to our previous slide, the church teaches that we must maintain a monogenism, that the origins of the human race began in one place. There is one origin, and Adam and Eve represent that one origin. They truly existed as our first ancestors. The second teaching of the church is that the soul of man does not evolve. Remember, evolution only applies to the material evolution of the body of the primate into an increasingly erect man, into the Homo sapiens, who is now hunched over in front of his computer here. Well, that's just a cartoon, but that you get the idea. If we look at a different image, the idea here is if this last man here, the most erect, if this is the Homo sapien, that is to say that scientific theories can posit a trajectory which leads up to this erect hominid, this Homo sapiens. But until he is a Homo sapien, he is not yet human. He shares maybe some of the similar material components, the bodily evolution, the same DNA pool as those who preceded him, but something unique and distinct happens in the moment he becomes a man. And that is, in this moment of the creation of Adam, God instills directly the human soul, image and likeness of God. It only happens in the very moment God creates Adam. So to clarify, Catholic teaching says that the individual human life begins at the very moment of conception, when the egg and sperm meet, when the egg is fertilized by the sperm. That's the moment you have a human being conceived, though in very early form, but nonetheless with the full potential of the mature human being. And so you have a human life here, a life that already images the image of God, a life that is worth defending, a life that has infinite dignity because it bears the image of God. And it's in this very moment, this moment of conception, that God touches, and this is a material conception, but it's in this moment that God instills the soul. God bestows this conception with life, and hence you have a human being. The human being is the composition of body, you have the body elements here, and soul, which is given by God. So at the moment of conception, God directly instills the human soul. Now that's phenomenal. Think about that. Where does this take place? It takes place in the womb of the mother. So God actually touches mysteriously, miraculously, into the very being of the mother. And human life begins as human, specifically as human, as imago Dei. So from this point on, once brought into existence, the soul does not evolve. Okay, growth and evolution are different, right? So your body can grow, but your body's not in the technical sense of science. It's not evolving into some other species beyond being human. The soul itself does not evolve. Once in existence, it bears the image of God. It is existing. From your readings, you should have noted that the author draws a very clear distinction between creation and evolution. Creation, he says, is following St. Thomas Aquinas, is much more fundamental and radical than mere change. Now, what you have in evolution is change. So you have the DNA of the primates, the early apes, that are changing, evolving over a long course of time. That's evolution. When we come to creation, we're talking about something radically different. Creation affects the thing entirely. Creation describes the relationship of the creature to God. God is the creator, and everything else is his creation. Between God, the creator, and all of his creations, his creatures, there's an infinite abyss because God is infinite, and the creations that come from his power and his love are not infinite. We come to exist at a point in time. God is that absolute being that we talked about when we looked at Aquinas' 5 ways for arguing for the existence of God. Versus for us, in the argument of contingency, we know to be or not to be. It is not absolutely necessary that we are, that we exist, that we be. And so we ourselves are non-being, who are brought into existence by the capital B being. And so this is a distinction of nature. God's very nature, his very essence is his essay. If you've taken metaphysics, you've heard that. God's essence is his essay. His essence, his nature, is his very being. Essay is being. So God's very being defines him, who he is. But our being is given to us. It's not absolutely necessary. We don't have a claim to being. And so our nature is not being as it is for God. And therefore we have a very distinction of nature here. God is of an absolutely different nature. He is divine. And we are creatures. We are not divine. And so we have what we call an analogy of being. We exist as non-being. We are non-being, but we actually do have lowercase b being. How? It is because we participate in the being of God. The essence of creation is an ontological dependence on God. Ontology has to do with being. And that's what we're talking about here, and what you talk about in your metaphysics course. But we are ontologically dependent on God. We are utterly contingent upon God. The fact that we are here means that he gave us existence and he continues to sustain our existence. We have being because he gives us this being. So creation points to God as the creator. He who we've called the unmoved mover. No one creates him. He alone is the creator. He who is the first mover. No one moves him. He is that absolute being that must be with the capital B. And we, there's a possibility of not being in us. We are contingent beings who actually have being because we share in God's being, in the analogy of being. This constitutes our very essence. Who are we? What is our nature? Our nature is to be dependent upon God. So when we deceive ourselves and want to shirk our dependence on God and deny it and pretend that we bring ourselves into being, then we are gravely deceived. Summarizing again what I've said here, this is the doctrine of creation ex nihilo. In Genesis 1, we see that God creates out of nothing. Ex, out of, nihilo, like annihilate or nihil is nothing. God creates out of nothing. There's not something already there, like Plato, and he molds it into another being. But rather, God, there's nothing there. There's an absolute void, says Genesis 1:1. And then God speaks. He speaks his word. And from his word, things come into being. So God, in creation, creates out of nothing. Evolution is very different. Evolution presupposes some substratum. There's a substrate that undergoes change. There's something already there. There's the early primate, there's the ape, there's a chimpanzee. It's changing, but it's not pulling something out of nothing. The ancient philosophers recognize that out of nothing comes nothing. You cannot bring something out of nothing. Rather, if you have nothing, out of nothing comes nothing. And so it's only with the creator who is infinite and that you can actually have God as a creator creating out of nothing, creation ex nihilo, needing no pre-existing substrate. This is the metaphysical reality of creation. by God who is all powerful. Creation is not change. And hence, you have a scientific theory of evolution, but you do not have a scientific theory of creation. Creation belongs to the realm of metaphysics. It's beyond the realm of science. Science examines what is observable. It collects data. It measures things. It puts things under a microscope and examines them. It cannot put God under a microscope. God is beyond the realm of science. So the idea of God as the creator belongs to the realm of metaphysics, not physics. Physics, as in your discipline in which you study the laws of nature, metaphysics is what is above. Meta is beyond. It's beyond the laws of nature. It's what is of supernature or of the supernatural. So it is unwise to develop a scientific theory of creation because that's not the correct category. To do so is to make a mismatch of categories. You need metaphysics. When we try to make creation into a science, that is a grave error according to the Catholic Church. You will find this position in some Christian denominations, but not ever in the Catholic Church. The attempt to do so, to create a creation science, making creation itself into a science, is called Creationism. And this is condemned by the Catholic Church. Now, what is Creationism? It's that position which advocates the literal reading of the biblical story of creation and wants to treat Genesis 1 and 2 as itself a science. Now, the proponents of creationism, many evangelical Christians, want to say that, well, if you're teaching evolution as a science in schools, then public schools must also teach the biblical story of creation as an alternative optional position, as another science. But the Catholic Church says, no, we do not hold to the same position. Rather, the Catholic teaching is more nuanced, and it wants to say that creation does not belong to the realm of science. Creation belongs, as we've said, to the realm of metaphysics. It's beyond science because it's not looking at stuff that's already there. God, in our understanding, creates out of nothing. So in summary, we return to this slide that you've seen before. Recall the relationship of faith and reason. They are distinct. They are not the same. So you do not want to mesh them and make them into the same thing. Faith belongs to the realm of supernatural knowledge. Reason belongs to the realm of natural knowledge. They are both domains of knowledge, but they are distinct domains. Creationism wants to mesh these two together. It wants to make a tenet of our faith, our belief in God as the creator, it wants to make that or bring it into the realm of natural reason. While natural reason can help illumine what we know by supernatural reason in our faith, these are not the same, and we should not mix match these categories. So they are distinct domains of knowledge, faith and reason. And at the same time, they are distinct, but they're not entirely autonomous, exclusive realms of knowledge. Okay, they do not disregard the other. Faith does involve reason. It is knowledge. It's knowledgeable. And reason is aided by faith. Reason finds its scope broadened because it finds the scope of knowledge to be beyond simply what is knowable through our senses and empirical science. Reason can be expanded to even a supernatural realm, and it's true knowledge that is revealed to us in our faith. So again, returning to what we've said and seen from Dei Filius, all knowledge is granted to us from God. Even things in the natural world are knowable because God is this God of reason who imprints his reasonability or reasonableness into his creation. And we, in our natural knowledge, examine, study, and catalog observations we have of our natural universe. While there is also faith, which is revealed to us, and this too is a kind of knowledge. Now, alongside this distinction between faith and reason, we can draw out an analogous distinction between science and religion. Science and religion, in the same way, should be harmonious because they both come from God. And yet we do not want to mix them as the creationists do, but rather maintain that they are distinct realms. Science has its particular domain as science, and faith or religion has its distinct domain as religion. So religion, therefore, is not founded on science. We do not base our faith on science, nor is science a mere extension of religion, nor is science based in religion. We must say that indeed these are distinct domains, and they have their proper methodologies that they must employ, such that in science, you want to be objective and you want to collect data and put things under a microscope. In religion, there's a different methodology. We look to what God has revealed to us and given to the church and the teachings of the church throughout the living tradition. There are clear, distinct realms with distinct methodologies, distinct realms of expertise. We can look at the distinction in terms of what the object. The object of science is to examine the what. What is happening when we speak of a lunar eclipse? Okay, how does a lunar eclipse happen? And explain to me the mechanics of a lunar eclipse. Religion does not ask those questions so much as the questions of meaning and purpose, the questions of why. Why do I exist? Now, science can't really tell you that. Science can talk about how there were electrons and neurons in our bodies and how they interact, but it doesn't give you the purpose of why I exist. It tells you how I exist and what happens when I have a nervous breakdown or I break a bone or I eat too much. What happens biologically, physiologically in my body? The what and the how are the realms of science. Religion asks the deeper questions of why, to what purpose, to what end. Now note that we want knowledge of both of these realms. We want knowledge that is offered to us by both science and religion. And so it would be foolish to say, all I need is science. All I need is reason. I don't need faith. I don't need religion. You're lopping off an entire realm of knowledge. You've narrowed your scope of understanding of yourself and of the world. And it would be similarly just as foolish to say, I don't need science. I don't need reason. Religion and my faith suffice. No, there's this other realm of natural reason that religion does not have expertise on. You should not be consulting your pastor about what medicine to take when you are ill. That's the realm of science, and there's a particular expertise. You should go to your doctor. So what we have here are not two realms in opposition, but rather they are distinct, and they can be in dialogue. They can be in harmony. There is a dialogical relationship. Why? Because as we've said, all truth comes from God, and it tends to God as the ultimate truth. Science and religion should not be in conflict, as it perhaps was in the Galileo affair in the 17th century. Remember, Galileo taught that the sun is the center of the universe. And this seemingly came into conflict with the faith, and the church condemned Galileo for this. That was an error on the part of the church. Recall also how we read from De Filius. When there is an error or a seeming contradiction between faith and reason, it's because you have either erred on the side of faith, you've misunderstood the teachings of the church, or there's an error on the side of reason. You've taken what is mere opinion and judged it to be objective reason. In the Galileo affair, there was an objective error which posited that religion and science were in conflict, when in actuality, they are not. We should also note that religion and science should not be separationistic, so one realm should not exclude the other. And this is what we often find in our world today. So if you're studying science, if you're aspiring to be a scientist, a doctor perhaps, can you be a good Catholic and be a scientist? Yes, indeed, says the church, because these are not exclusive realms. So we must maintain this nuanced understanding, this mature understanding of what is science and what is religion and how they relate harmoniously. Because, yes, indeed, the church was the promoter of the sciences and the arts for centuries, and it still is. It does not teach that these two are in conflict. Rather, it teaches us that science is from God. It's God's reasonableness that has given intelligibility into the world, that enables our minds to observe and to understand. And that's in the realm of natural reason, endowed by God. And this is not in conflict with the realm of supernatural reason. So science and religion should not be separationistic, nor should they be fused one into the other. You should not mesh these two. You should not mix match the categories. And this is what creation science does when it wants to posit the doctrine of creation as a science, positing that creation should be taught